Brewster here with a new episode of Chordplay. This is the chords of Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I've had some requests to feature this legendary funk, R&B, and soul band. I've also had requests for more funk, and Earth, Wind, and Fire are definitely legendary. They formed in Chicago, Illinois, which is my hometown, in 1969, and they've won 6 Grammy Awards. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a lot of other awards and accolades. They've sold over 90 million copies of albums worldwide. 21 studio albums, 4 live albums, 17 compilations, 62 singles, and 19 of those singles were top 10 hits. Earth, Wind, and Fire are legends. So like I just mentioned, Earth, Wind, and Fire has been together since 1969, and they've had a lot of member changes over the years. And the chord-based and rhythm guitar parts in this episode are going to come from an assortment of players that have worked with this band. That includes Michael Beal, Ronald Batista, Johnny Graham, and Al McKay, definitely legends of funk, R&B, and soul guitar. So the music and examples in this episode came from 4 Earth, Wind, and Fire albums, and I basically prepared for this lesson just like I always do. I went all the way back to the beginning and listened to the early albums and releases, and then just started kind of pulling ideas from there. And I am focusing more on like funky guitar parts in this episode, because definitely Earth, Wind, and Fire had lots of funk, but then they had like soulful ballads and R&B songs and stuff too, so they mixed it up. And eventually they started putting out like disco and pop sounding music. But the early years is that skanky, dirty funk, which is what I'm always interested in and looking for. So anyway, there is an assortment of different material here, but definitely Earth, Wind, and Fire kicks ass. So here we go. With the opening, that was This World Today from the first Earth, Wind, and Fire album, their self-titled album from 1971. And this is an interesting, kind of soulful, funky, guitar part. And it starts with harmonics in the very beginning, like this. Right, it's like the Earth, Wind, and Fire doorbell right there, just along the 7th fret on the G, B, and high E. And then you're going to basically move into this little part of F major. It's like F major, or F sharp over A sharp. Right? So think of that F sharp major like 70s kind of inversion, but we're just spelling it out and then strumming it. And then go to the Hendrix chord, F sharp 7 sharp 9, right? And then it basically changes to this, and that's like a little part of G major. And then it moves to F sharp 7. So this song's in B minor, right? So we're basically going to the flat 6, like that G major. And then we're going to the 5 chord, but it's a major, kind of flip there for that F sharp 7. And I like that little half step, movement with the chords, the G major. That F sharp 7 right there. It's really cool. You can do that twice and then go to a B minor 7 right there and strum that. And eventually it moves down to that F sharp 7 down there, a couple hits. And then right back to that B minor 7 again. And then we're back on that flat 6 chord, that G7 right there, and strum that. And then it ends up on that F sharp 7 sharp 9 again. Basically goes right back to the verse again. love those chords and the progression too. Really funky. Next up's the main riff from the song Come On Children. This is also from the first Earth, Wind & Fire album. And this is kind of short and sweet. It's really just an E9, but it's the way they're hitting the chord like this. Kind of short and sweet there. So just think an E9, right? The funk chord. So you're going to basically hit that low E, and then you're strumming the chord like the bottom part of the chord once. And then you're going to basically kind of play with that low E open. And then you're going to strum that chord twice. So it's like kind of playing with the root and kind of getting funky with the muted strums, and then strum it once. Play the low E open, kind of play some muted strums, and then play that chord twice, like this. Pretty basic, but it's kind of showing you how you can manipulate and play around with a chord in a funky way, and you're just playing one chord, which is pretty cool. Next up's the song Help Somebody. This is also from the first Earth, Wind & Fire album, and that first album's super funky and really interesting. Definitely check it out. I think it's commonly overlooked, but Help Somebody starts with these octaves, and then you got this funky riff with some cool chords, like this. Start with octaves, think like George Benson or something like that. Right? So you're starting on that F, sliding that C or that B flat to C and back, and then that E flat to D flat, and then A flat to G, and then you're basically moving that G over to C, so you're playing a C and G together, like that, kind of like a C5, but it's a high one like that. Do all that again. Actually, the horns and the whole band come in the second time. Right? And then it's a C minor 7 right there. Right? And this is a really crafty chord change. So a C minor 7 like that. Right? And then that's a G7 flat 13 down there. So it's really cool if you fret it like this. Take that, move it down to the 3rd fret, and then use your pinky there to grab that B and that D sharp. Or I guess it's actually an E flat there, but that B and E flat, like that. So a G7 flat 13. That Earth, Wind & Fire commonly added really jazzy, voicings and chords to their chord progressions, more so than typical for funk, soul and R&B guitarists. So they did lean a little bit more toward jazz, just a heads up. Next up's the super funky riff from Remember the Children. This came from the album Last Days and Time, and there's really no chord here. It's like an implied, A minor 7, but I just wanted to include this because it's super funky. And you do find, funk and soul and R&B guitarists playing parts like this, And if you really listen to it, each time he comes around, he plays that lick different. It keeps varying, and that's really cool. So the first time, so right there for this, just think, A minor pentatonic right there. And you're doing this. So you're kind of like grabbing that A, smear bending that C, and then grab that D note. And then that little basically happens on every, pass of this riff. It's the first part that changes. Then you've got... So that time it's like that CD. Then he starts doing like A to C and then bend that D. Like that. Then he goes back to that C, D, C thing. Like I said, there's really no chords going on there, but I just like that variation of that funky single note riff. Sometimes it's bent, sometimes it's fretted, but super funky. Check that song out. Next up's this super funky riff from the song Build Your Nest, and this came from the album Head to the Sky, and this is really cool, like this. So this is really interesting because you're doing like the Steve Cropper kind of sixth slide, like that. So you're sliding that double 7 to double 9 and then catching that high B note there on the 7th fret on the high E, like that. And then you're going to basically slide up, catch that B, shift back, and then you're going to play this B7, it's like a B7 sus2. So you're going to basically do the scratch and sniff kind of rhythm, and if you want to think of it like separated, the first time you just hit once at the end of that figure, right? And then the second time you're going to scratch and sniff and then hit that chord twice at the end. And then you're going to do the first one again where you just do it once at the end. And you're going to do it one more time and then add that Steve Cropper kind of fill in there. Right? And then you're going to do that whole thing over again. Funky, and I love that Cropper kind of sixth action. I'm definitely a big Booker T fan, and I love Steve Cropper. And hearing that, it's like, yeah, that's cool. Okay, next up is the change from Build Your Nest, and this is super cool. So there we're definitely doing the sixth kind of workout there. So that's between like the 10th and 12th fret there on the G and the high E string, right? And then you're going to move over to the D and the B, and you're going to play with sixth right there too, like this. And you're going to strum that like 12th fret twice and then shift back to the 10th fret and then start it over. So really slow. Tempo. Really cool stuff right there. Next up, this is the main riff from the song Mighty Mighty. This came from the album Open Our Eyes, which is on the wall right there. And that was one of the last Earth, Wind & Fire albums when they started to move away from the experimental kind of funky jazz style. And they started to refine their style and their sound. They became a little poppier after that. I honestly like the early years when it's kind of raw and funky and jazzy. But Mighty Mighty's cool. Something like this. Something like that. So we're basically moving, this is all like in D in the first part. Like that. So it's like D major. You're And then you're moving to this, and it's like a D, like a D add 9 sus4 implied, and then that's going to be like a D sus2 implied right there. So you're just kind of moving between those three chords. Then the entire thing goes up a half step to E flat and do it again. So it's interesting to learn the riff, you know, in one location in one key, and then suddenly it changes. And you can hear that a lot in Earth, Wind & Fire's music, where they kind of shift things, either like, you know, that was like a half step. Sometimes it might be like a minor third or a whole step or something. But learning the riff in one key, and then transposing it to another key, another location. It's really important to kind of see like how you can do things like that, and kind of like your musical mind's eye with chords and positions and fingerings on the fretboard. Okay, last but not least is the song Mom. This came from the album Last Days in Time, and today is Mother's Day, so this seemed fitting, even though this is a very eerie guitar part for a song called Mom. But something like this. So it basically starts with this. You hear him slide into that A note there, and that's kind of an implied D minor add 9 that he's playing with up there. So like the open D, the open high E, and that F and A note, and then occasionally he's also grabbing that B flat right there. You know, something like that. Interesting guitar part. It was unexpected from Earth, Wind & Fire. I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Like that. You know, do that for a few rounds. You hear him grab the C note down here. And then he strums that chord. That's like an A minor flat 6 add 11 right there, implied. Let that ring, and then you hear this part. So it's like G minor there with the G note, that fretted B flat, and the open D string. Then move that G to G flat. Now it's a G flat augmented implied. That down to F, and now it's like an F6 sus4 implied. Back to the G flat augmented. Definitely a sucker for those moody, sad chords and songs and progressions, and that's interesting that that song's called Mom, and it sounds like it's in a graveyard or something. It's like, whoa, that sounds scary. You know, it's like King Diamond or something. It's like, are we sure this is Earth, Wind & Fire? But a really cool song, and that's a cool guitar part too. I love those kind of moody chords. Sad song for all you mothers out there. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with this look at Earth, Wind & Fire. Definitely a legendary, very influential, and important band, too. I mean, they've been around for a very long time. I remember when I was a kid growing up, hearing like relatives and parents like singing their song, Shining Star, and some of that stuff. And it was like, what is this? You know, and immediately it was infectious with the groove and the funky. parts and stuff. And then when you really dive in with the guitar and start picking out those guitar parts, start picking out the chords and progressions, you're going to notice like, oh, they're doing a lot more. They're doing a lot more than just banging on ninth chords. There's some jazz voicings, there's jazz progressions, and really interesting stuff going on, especially in their early years. I mean, no offense to the more recent music, but that early stuff from the 70s definitely is the bomb. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe and lay out lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.